Alrighty, what up? It's Shingster94, and welcome to my updated live tier list of the Resident Evil games. So yeah, I had a few technical difficulties getting this stream up and running. That's why I'm like 4 minutes late. Sorry about that. But I got it going, so here we are. Alright, so yeah, let me go to the tab of the tier list. Okay, here we are. So how y'all doing on this Saturday afternoon? Or morning if you're actually on the West Coast like I am. We got one more hour of it anyway. So right now, the only person I saw in the chat was Manu Carrotman. And it's not Airmac just popped in. What's up, man? Alright. So yeah, this is going to be an updated tier list from the last one I did like a couple years ago, back when Village was brand new and RE-Verse wasn't even released yet. It was getting delayed at the time. Hey, Chris Walker. I know you're actually Alucard. That's awesome. Ace of Skulls, what's up? All right. Yeah, it's time, Chris. All right. Yeah, I got the chat like way over there on my new monitor, but I'm conducting the stream on my main TV like I've been for the past couple years with live streams and whatnot, because I want to be able to see this very clearly and be right in front of me without being too close up on the other monitor. Doing good, it's not Airmac, awesome. Hey, Hellmaster, good to see ya. Alright, so yeah, if we take a look at this tier list, it started off with standard S through D. Yeah, S through D. I added the F as well as these top and bottom ones. And as you can see, I actually tell you what these mean, just in case anyone... A lot of people probably know what goat means, but I'm not sure if a lot of people even know what toad means. I learned about that on Twitter like over a year ago, and I've been using it ever since. I think it's perfect for the absolute worst of the worst bottom for people. Alright, so I got the tiers set up. Same style as I did last time. It's sort of between S and F. It's sort of health state related. So S is like you're completely free of the virus. This was the best color I could think of for that. But then A through F. A is fine, B is yellow fine, C is caution, D is orange caution, and F is danger, of course. And terrible 90 day, you're dead. Greatest of all time. I mean, you're already beyond the virus, so I don't know. All right, and on the bottom, you can see have all of the games listed. A couple of them may be considered extra because they're either just a port of the game or something else, but I am going to rank everything we see here because I have officially and legitimately played every single one of these at least once. So, the last time I did a tier list, a couple of them may have not been legitimate because I technically never played it, but I have only seen gameplay of it. This time I have physically, with my own hands, played all of these games. Alright. Hellmaster was wondering why people were saying the goats didn't really know about that. Yep, that's what it means. That's why people say it a lot. Manu RE4 VR sitting there rent free. I mean, I am gonna rank it because I have experience with the VR version of RE4 as well. All right, I think that's enough introductions. Why don't we get going with this? And again, just like the description says, and when I shouted this out a few hours ago, this is going to be my personal tier list only. I'm not going to do a separate tier list for you guys or the community like I did last time. This will save some time, and I can be completely honest with myself and not be influenced whatsoever by any outside influence. All right? So, without further ado, let's get started. So, and yeah, I'll keep an eye on your guys' chat. Even though I'm not doing a tier list for you guys, I'm going to see what you guys are saying for each game because I am curious what you guys think of every game. So yeah, I'll still look at it. I'm just not going to do a whole nother tier list for it. So, let's start with the OG, of course, RE1. Alright, so I am going to be comparing quite a bit to my previous tier list. So I actually am going to have some photos like on my phone ready to go, kind of to reference from. Yeah, favorites. There we go. Perfect. That'll make it very easy. Okay. So, in my previous tier list, I did rank this as a B for a lot of good reasons, obviously. Resident Evil 1, it's the originator, it started the whole franchise, and there is a lot of story to like uncover to get the series started. But being the very first game, it is clunky as hell. The tank controls like are they're not too bad to get used to, but out of all the tank controlled games, this one is the stiffest, and there's not a lot of maneuverability, and you can get soft stun locked by zombies in this game, and it can be a pain in the ass. But anyway, I gave it a B in my previous tier list. I did not give it enough praise, like, from me personally. I love the hell out of this game. Being the very first Resident Evil game, I've played it along with the other two in the original trilogy an uncountable number of times. So I just know I love this game and everything about it. So I'm actually going to put it up into the A tier this time around. The very first Resident Evil game is an A rank for me. Alright. Just making sure. Checking what you guys are looking at. Yeah, I just went infinite. But yeah, the voice acting, though, is what it is. It's infamous, but a lot of people, like, remember it because of how it is. Has a lot of memorable, cheesy dialogue. Manu, you're going to state your thoughts for each game. So Resident Evil 1, still, of course, great for Kickstarter the franchise. Dialogue is cheesy, but iconic. Least favorite thing is just the mess between ports. Yeah, it's true. It's not a whole lot of consistency between the ports of all this. There needs to be one ultimate universal port where all of the extra content from every port gets all piled up into one big port. That's what I think. All right. Moving on to this one immediately, I'm putting in that one slot, the GOAT. Resident Evil 2 OG is still the greatest of all time for me for so many reasons. It has one of the best and solid storylines of all the games, and the difference between the A and B scenarios creates a lot of diversity and replayability, and the extra modes, especially with the DualShock version and the N64 port specifically. Yeah, overall, all-around good game, and it established more characters that all of which were memorable for years. And yeah, I don't think I need to say much more about it. It is the GOAT for me. All right, Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. So this one, yeah, it's going in the same tier as I did last time. It's an S tier game for me because it is nearly as good as Resident Evil 2, both mechanically and plot-wise for me. Nemesis chasing you throughout the city the entire game does up the fear factor a lot. Of course, when you play the game as much as I have, the fear is kind of gone, and it's fun to play around with him each time you come across him, and the few different ways you can deal with him depending on the area where you meet him. And then the fact that if you play in hard mode, he drops stuff for you to create a couple extra weapons, get more ammo and health. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And then the switching to Carlos temporarily to heal Jill. Yeah, there's a lot of good things to say about 3. I've seen quite a few people in the community who do regard 3 as their GOAT instead of 2 for a lot of understandable reasons. So I give respect to that. So yeah. Not Airmac. You played the N64 port of RE2 before the PS1 version. Oh man, I hope that didn't feel like a downgrade for any reason. Alright. Yeah, it doesn't seem there's too many people here right now, which, oh well. This is mainly for myself, so it's okay that I don't have a huge audience. So yeah, I'm just doing this live just to see some others' opinions while I'm doing it. I think if I ever do a tier list for a third time, I'm going to quit doing it live, and I think I'm going to record a full-on video, because then I can shoehorn scenes from every game as I'm talking about them, and I can go into way more detail with it since I'm not under pressure of always being up and live and, like, pausing the awkward silences and tripping over my own speech like I've done a few times now. But I'm not embarrassed. It's just not who I am. I'm human. All right. You don't want to flood the chat with paragraphs. Yeah, and I am gonna try to read some of it, so yeah, maybe keep it short and simple. Okie dokie, let's move on. After Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. Oh, I just realized something was out of order here. Yeah, that's out of order. There we go, we're good. The next one is Resident Evil Survivor, the very first spin-off of the franchise. So yeah, this is the first time where, for me anyway, it kind of drops off the hype and everything, and there's not much to talk about this game. It's a fairly short game. It does have, if you're a hardcore fan, it does have characters you can remember, like Ark Thompson, of course. But the voice dialogue is even worse than the first Resident Evil game, in my opinion, and the pre-rendered graphics are at an all-time low, like, compared to everything else. Unfortunately, I don't think any modders are interested in glorifying this game very much, other than Aiden Watkins, who made the third person, or the fixed camera angle mod of it to where it plays just like the classic trilogy. But other than that, I don't know if many people are interested in, like, putting this out there. Is anyone interested in a remake of this game? I kind of would be, actually, just to see it in the RE engine. But anyway, where does it go in the tier list for me? Well, first of all, let me see what I put in my previous tier list. Okay, in my last one, I put it at the bottom of my D tier. That pretty much is gonna be the same. I still think it is a D tier game overall, honestly. But yeah, with everything I said about it, that is why. So I'm putting it in the D tier, it's staying there. It's not the most terrible game, so that's why it's not in the F tier. But yeah, it's not really significant overall. Code Veronica X, on the other hand, is a fantastic game. Just brings you right back to the main storyline and expands on Claire and Chris a little bit and establishes new plot lines that we get to see continued in the future. Calling out like Resident Evil 5 right now. This is also why I really, really think it needs a remake before Resident Evil 5 for those same reasons. But yeah. Hey, Grandmaster, good to see you. Oh, you're right. Okay, there's more out of order. Let me fix that. There's quite a few, actually. Shoot. It's because the page refreshed, probably. No, it's like that. Okay. Okay. There you go. I think that is the correct order. We're going in order of release date, of course. Yeah, Manu. Let Code Veronica Remake happen, please. Alright. So anyway, back to Code Veronica X. Yeah, stellar game. It is one of the more difficult games. I've said countless times that, in my opinion, it is the hardest classic tank-controlled fixed camera angle game in the franchise. But even so, you play it enough times, it doesn't have to be that difficult. I only say that because it is extremely unforgiving to first-time players, due to the fact that you can get soft-locked in the game if you don't bring certain items, or keep them out of the item box, or I should say keep them in the item box before going off with Claire in Antarctica, and a lot of things. The character dynamic is, like, really interesting with the Ashfords, digging deeper into, like, Umbrella's past through that, and, you know, the very brief pseudo-relationship between Steve and Claire, even though Steve probably was more for her than she was for him. I mean, I don't know. That ending, though, who knows? But yeah, it is one of the saddest deaths in the franchise, Steve dying, that's for sure. And once again, I don't find Steve as annoying as others do. I think he's just simply young. And yeah, he's young and dumb. That's all. He's not necessarily annoying. But anyway, where do I rank it? It is, once again, a very good game. Let me see. Okay, yeah, just receiving a message. But anyway, what I put it last time, I put it at an A tier game. Okay, that makes sense. That pretty much is still how I feel about it. I think it's an A tier game, not really an S because of the difficulty and the length. And some mechanics. I mean, it is the first like 3D game. It was the first game off of the PS1, like when PS2 and the next generation came out. So it was the first like almost full 3D game in a way. But it was kind of clunky for that platform, for those platforms. So yeah, A tier it goes. Of course, near the end of the tier list, I'm going to fine tune this and I'm going to put other games in front of each other to be more of like level based to where like top of the A tier is better than bottom of the A tier, if you know what I mean. But yeah, I'll do that at the very end of it. So I won't take too much time with that. Yeah, Chris, the story of Code Veronica doesn't get praised enough. It is a really good story, that's for sure. Yes, Grandmaster. Yeah, my point exactly. Alrighty. Continuing. We got the arcade version of Code Veronica in ways. Survivor 2 Code Veronica. This is hot garbage. It's like, it's not the absolute worst game on this list, but it's definitely going straight into the F tier for me. This is just one giant arcade game that is, I guess, technically canon because it all takes place in Claire's head, like within a dream or something like that, but it just, yeah, it really isn't plot driven whatsoever. One giant arcade game. The versus Roach mode is a joke, as I've said, and the dungeon mode, it just feels way stretched out with all those missions and everything you have to do and everything. But if you're into arcade games, yeah, Survivor 2 would be up your alley. But otherwise, it is trash to me. And yeah. So, enough said. Let's go into the F tier again. Gaiden, another questionable game. However, this one, see, I am a huge fan of retro, like, sound in general, and I love the bittiness of the Game Boy Color, sound core for this game. And there's actually a couple tracks in the game that I'd like to bop my head to. As you could hear the drums, but in, like, bitty version, you know? But the soundtrack alone shouldn't be enough to put it like way high on a pedestal. Story-wise, it is okay. It is very interesting that we get to see Barry Burton again, and he teams up with Leon, something you probably would have never conceived like right away. But it is questionable that the middle character is this young girl named Lucia. Obviously not, I guess, not old enough to be handling a weapon, but when it comes to just gameplay mechanics, any character can use any weapon, so yeah, she can freaking wield a rocket launcher. But yeah, in the Game Boy Color, it's, yeah. Manu, that is a good point. Gaiden is the Revelation's ancestor because Gaiden is actually the first game that takes place on a ship. It started that whole little trend that some of the games like to do. But yeah. Hey, Fire Mario. Yeah, missed the start. Oh well, you're just gonna have to watch it back later or something like that. And yeah, I'm going quicker with this one because, you know. Anyway, with all that considered, let me see. I don't really think it's an F tier game. Unlike the last tier list where I put it at the top of my F tier. So it was teetering on the F tier, D tier line. I think enough time, a little more time has passed. I've thought about it more. There are worse games. I'm honestly going to put it into the D tier, but below Survivor. I do like Survivor more than Gaiden, but I don't think I'm going to put it into the F tier this time. I think it's deserving of at least a D for its potential. If they got rid of the stupid ending and it was a little more canon, then I'd probably appreciate it even more. And it probably would be maybe a C tier game. But yeah, that ending is a bad like shot to the stomach. So, all right. Yeah, Capcom did go out of their way to say it's non-canon. They basically slashed the canonicity of it like after some time. Good decision. Good decision. I do love to run with the gag, like, fan theory that Leon, like, from 4 onward or something like that, is the clone Leon from the ending of Gaiden. Or something along those lines. And it's a funny theory. Obviously, it's not true, but it is fun to roll with in certain situations. Or the reason why he's so bad at driving vehicles, maybe. That has something to do with it. I don't know. But anyway, enough about that. Let's move on. Let's go to a really great game here. Resident Evil Remake. It's definitely going straight into the S tier. No hesitation with that. This is, as I've said many times, this is what I believe is the best game to play for a brand new newcomer to the franchise. That is the first game they should play, in my opinion. Is the remake of the very first Resident Evil game, because it tells you the whole story of the original Resident Evil 1, plus adds new elements, like with the whole Lisa Trevor and it's like other things. Like, I forgot, I don't think I'm not sure if there's a scene with William Birkin in Remake. I think it's a 0 that you actually get to see him, I'm pretty sure. But regardless, it gets a lot closer to that storyline, and it does fill in some gaps that were probably there in the original Resident Evil. So I do think this is the best game to play for a newcomer. The zombies are bullet sponges. That's kind of one of the weak points for me, but you do have the chance of a critical headshot, so that does compensate for it just a little bit. And yeah, speedrunning this game is kind of really fun, especially when you use the stair tactic, when you just like slide down the stairs if you spam the run button, stuff like that. Yeah, and the defensive items are really nice. Good way, like if you get grabbed, like unintentionally, of course, you have a chance to not get injured somewhat. So it is really nice, and it could save your life against insta-kill, like maybe an insta-kill attack or something. All right. So yeah, definitely straight into the S tier for me. And yeah, I will move it and Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, depending like on my preference once we get to the end of this tier list. Moving on, Resident Evil 0. Okay, definitely one of the most underrated games in the franchise. It has the same exact mechanics basically as Resident Evil Remake, gameplay-wise, but this is the first game where you're controlling 2 people, essentially, and you can constantly switch between them. One of the weak points that a lot of people agree on with this is the removal of the item box, and you have to drop your items, and you have to remember where you dropped them to get them again, and this really plays into the whole hook shot hate, because it's one of the only items you do have to constantly go back for once you drop it, because it takes up 2 slots of your inventory. And yeah, it is very inconvenient, the whole dropping items thing. It's like, some people who don't mind it argue, well, it's like an item box, it's wherever you place it. The problem is it's not like an item box because it's not connected wherever you go. So there's the difference right there. But yeah, it's just above mid-level to me overall, personally. There's nothing super bad about it. You get to play as Rebecca, and we get introduced to Billy Cohen, a character that sorely needs some sort of update. Like, I don't care if Capcom just went out of their way to say he actually died somewhere or in the forest or something like that. He needs some sort of closure is what I want, basically. Either affirm his death or bring him back for something. That would be really great. Yeah, mixed bag. It's definitely not a gold tier game for sure. It does have its issues, but it's not. I think it gets overhated in some areas, like that I mentioned. Like with enough skill level, you can deal with those shortcomings. So anyway, what I ranked it last time was, let's see, I ranked it a B tier in the last tier list. And yeah, I'm pretty much there with it again. It is a B tier game. Yeah. Okie dokie. Next game, Resident Evil Dead Aim. Technically, Gun Survivor 4. In the Survivor series, the third one being Dino Stalker, part of the Dino Crisis series, which I still never played to this day. But yes, Dead Aim. So this game sort of was a precursor, you could say, to Resident Evil 4's gameplay, because this game was actually the first one to do over-the-shoulder first person. Oh yes. While it is a survivor game, so it does have first-person shooting. When you're moving around regularly, it is over-the-shoulder for third person, albeit directly behind you, like straight on, unlike Resident Evil 4 and onward, where it was more to the side and actually over your shoulder. Dead Aim is more like over your back, if you know what I mean. But anyway, and it is a knockoff Resident Evil 2 in ways, where freaking Bruce McGivern is like a knockoff Leon, and Fong Lin is a knockoff Ada. It also takes place on a ship again, so it's the second game in the series to take place primarily on a ship. Not the whole thing is on the ship, but yeah, it starts on the ship. And Morpheus Duvall, the first the first trans character in a lot of ways, especially when he goes through his mutation. But it is kind of neat. And the whole like story, or the what describes the T plus G virus, which is what it is in this game, and how it I guess it emphasizes on the personality of the infectant. So this is why Morpheus ends up as like a as like a lady tyrant almost, because he's all about beauty, and it does come out sort of in the tyrant form. All right, and its voice acting is very mediocre. It's just as bad as maybe Survivor, and at the very least RE1 for sure. It's too quiet in a lot of places. You almost can't even make him out. No, Morpheus. Anyway, so where do I rank it? It's definitely not the best game. Out of the Survivor games, it is the best one, in my opinion. So if I look back on my previous tier list, I'd put it in the C tier. Yeah. And I pretty much agree. Still, it is a C tier game for me. Definitely would take 0 over it any day. Okie dokie. All right, moving on. My absolute favorite spin-off games, Resident Evil Outbreak and Outbreak File 2. Once again, I'm sort of grouping them together. Like, I don't really think one's better than the other. They play exactly the same. It's just Outbreak File 2 does add a couple more mechanics that are helpful, such as moving while shooting, and the ability to command your character to use an item, and the new sorry, like, ad-lib or something like that. So, obviously, if I were to put one over the other, it would be Outbreak File 2 because of the additional mechanics, but Outbreak 1 has seen a lot more playtime from me than File 2, so it's kind of mixed. It's very both. So they're grouped together, they're just going to be put in the same boat, exactly. So Outbreak being one of my favorite spin-offs, I'm definitely going to put it into the A rank at least. There you go. The very first multiplayer game in the series, way ahead of its time. It unfortunately came out too early with the online thing. If it had waited another generation of gaming, so like maybe at least until 2005 or 6 instead of 2003 when it originally came out, or yeah, I'm pretty sure it was 2003. It's either that or 4, but anyway, if it had come out just one generation later, this game would have really taken off. I mean, nowadays, the only way to play it online is through emulation, which if you do achieve, it is really fun to play with other people. I'm not going to lie. Still love the sessions I had with a couple of my followers playing Outbreak File 1. But yeah, really great game overall. It takes you back to Raccoon City. It just has that core Resident Evil feeling to me. All right. So enough said about that one. I'm putting it there in the A rank. I don't even have to look at the previous tier list to know where it belongs. All right, OG RE4. Definitely a God tier style game. It's definitely going up here in the S rank for me. I don't have to say much about it. It's like, even though the remake is out now and it has been for several months, which I do like more than the OG, doesn't mean the OG is now a obsolete game or anything like that. Still very fun to play, has an unforgettable storyline, plot, and characters, voice dialogue, everything. One of the saddest deaths is contained within it as well, with the death of Luis. And yeah, just the sheer amount of weaponry in it. It does turn the series into the action bit that lasted throughout the mid to late 2000s, but that's just embedded in the Resident Evil culture at this point. I don't think it's like I don't think it's a thing to grade it low anymore. It's like, I like the mix of gameplay styles that the whole entire franchise offers at this point. So Resident Evil 4, it's not a bad point that it is more on the actiony side, and it started it down that hill. But it gave us melee moves in such a way that, hey, it started me and my channel, you could say. So, yeah, I have a lot to praise about it. So, as top of the S tier for sure it is for now. All right, next one, we got a port of a game. Resident Evil Deadly Silence. This is a DS port of Resident Evil 1. So, everything about it pretty much is, well, being on the DS, of course, graphically, it's not really better than the first one, but that's one of the things people shouldn't like put all their marbles in, is graphics, of course. That's just one single element. It disregards so much after that. So yeah, graphics-wise, maybe not, but everything else, it maintains the plot. It's exactly the same game, but being on the DS, they went back into it, they tweaked some of the mechanics. The characters are a little more, like, lively now. You can actually see them breathing. It does have the quick 180-degree turn, and being the DS, there are some exclusive features. I actually finally got the chance to play through it, like a full game once, like just like a week ago or something. And I did play the Rebirth mode, which is exclusive to that, which adds new mechanics such as knife fights here and there throughout the game, and certain puzzles you have to solve with like the stylus and stuff. There is one point in the game that kind of actually took a point off for me. So there's this one puzzle or mechanic you have to use the microphone for, basically, where you have to blow out some candles in order to get an item to get you a good weapon. Unfortunately, through emulation, that microphone function does not work very well, and I could not make it past this point on the DS version, like, if I wanted that weapon. Basically, I had to skip the weapon. And one of my frequent followers looked into it, and apparently a lot of people have had this issue. So doing this through emulation could be a drawback for some areas, but overall, this is the best version. This is for sure, especially after playing it. This is the best version of the original Resident Evil 1 to play, Deadly Silence. They fixed a lot of things that some people had issues with the original game, first of all. So this, being a slightly better version than the original Resident Evil 1 for me, this is actually going at least in the bottom of the S tier for me, because that's how much I love the very first Resident Evil game. Oh my god, yeah, man who knows what I'm talking about, because he's the person who looked into it and discovered that. Alright, enough about that. Okay, we got Resident Evil The Umbrella Chronicles, our first rail shooter, the first game on the Wii. Yeah. Also the first game on the 7th generation of video game consoles. So yeah, Umbrella Chronicles is a good, nice retelling of a lot of the main events during the Raccoon City time, 1998. So it depicts the Resident Evil 0, Resident Evil 1, and Resident Evil 3 Nemesis in rail shooter mode. This is the closest thing to like a mid-2000s remake of the second and third games that we got. Honestly, this and Darkside Chronicles, of course. Those are the closest things to the remake 2002 style of those two games. I do still wish we got something like that in the past. But anyway, overall, like being able to relive through the storylines of those 3 games, plus the exclusive scenario of Umbrella's End, which tells some events of what led to Umbrella's End, literally. It is a pretty cool game overall. Of course, being on rails, you don't have a whole lot of control of where you're going. It's really just a shooter, all shooting, really, mostly, with a few QTEs thrown in. But yeah. So to rank it, so last time I put this on the very bottom of my B tier. And I did put Darkside in front of it, which is still the case. I do think mechanically Darkside just is a little better, even though its shaky cam is nauseating. But yeah, I'm going to keep to that. It's going to go into the B tier for the time being. Oh yeah, Grandmaster, an RE rendition of Umbrella's End would be fantastic, for sure. Okay, next. Ooh, Resident Evil 5. Okay, this is one where I don't think I gave it enough praise, like, from me personally. So, Resident Evil 5 is literally what started me on YouTube. For people who don't already know. Yeah, Resident Evil 5 represents my origins in the public entertainment, and yeah, I played it for hours upon hours between 2009 and 2013, at least. Oh man, and I was setting near records in Mercenaries Reunion on the Xbox 360 with one of my old friends, and yeah, I have a lot of praise for it. Now, I didn't play the campaign nearly as much as Mercenaries, but I do appreciate the campaign. It brings back Chris, Jill, introduces us to Sheva, and really a lot of the BSAA stuff. I mean, it is the first game to mention the BSAA, but it is divisive, that's for sure. It is one of the most action-y games in the series, and there's really not much scary about it whatsoever. It really lacks the horror vibe. But yeah, again, I'm not really making that a bad point anymore at this point. I like the mix. I love the sheer amount of melee moves that are in this game. How each character has like 8 different moves, and depending on where you stun the enemy, and that's what got me started. So ultimately, with everything considered, regardless that it was a game that plummeted the franchise in terms of being related to survival horror and stuff like that, and divided the community, I personally think, let me see, where did I put this? Yeah, I actually put this in the B tier last time, at the top of my B tier. This time around, I'm definitely giving it way more credit. I'm putting it in the A tier now. Resident Evil 5 is an A tier game for me, personally. And that's all I'm going to say about it beyond that. Alright, next we got the other Chronicles game, Darkside Chronicles. This one recounts the stories of Resident Evil 2, Code Veronica, and has the exclusive scenario Operation Javier, which was referenced in more depth in Resident Evil 4 Remake just recently. So this has seen some more eyes because of that whole reference now, probably. And yeah, again, I do put it above Umbrella Chronicles. I already know that for a fact, so I'm going to put it right there. It's also a B tier game for me because it is just another Chronicles. It's still on rails, and it has a lot of the same mechanics as Umbrella Chronicles, but it's like it improves in some areas, and the shaky cam I think is a downgrade just a little bit, to be honest. But yeah, I think that's all I'm going to say about it, honestly. All right. Oh, okay, the Mercenaries 3D. Exclusively on the 3DS, and it's also just a giant minigame. It's the Mercenaries from Resident Evil 5 just put into a huge game, basically. Now this, regardless of that, because I am a huge fan of the Mercenaries, I did get a lot of enjoyment out of this. Definitely more than like Gaiden or Survivor, actually. So I actually would probably put it above those, maybe at least the C tier. Yeah, there's not much to talk about because there's no story plot. It's a giant Mercenaries game. You just go through missions and enemy hordes and stuff like that. And and it combines elements of Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 5's Mercenaries in terms of stages and characters. Very huge miss that Leon was not in the Mercenaries 3D. Instead, they put Claire in it, which is nice because she doesn't get a lot of attention when it comes to minigames and Mercenaries and stuff like that. But overall, it's like, yeah, I think Leon still would have been the better pick overall, you know, him being more, like, government trained and stuff like that. Anyway, so yeah, I'm putting it at the C tier this time around, which, I mean, it's the same as my last tier list, basically. There you go. I do want an Ultimate Mercenaries game like Mercenaries 3D on current platforms that takes it to a whole nother level. That we're talking, it includes elements from nearly every Resident Evil game somehow. It's like the latest style of Mercenaries, but you can choose every main character and nearly every secondary character and some of the most iconic antagonists. Like, what I really want for an Ultimate Mercenaries game is a pipe dream. It's probably not really even conceivable, actually. But anyway, enough about that. Next, we got Resident Evil Revelations, which definitely comes after 3D because it originally was released on the Nintendo 3DS. They since, like several months later, ported it to console, which definitely improved the hell out of it. This is a really good game. To me, Revelations was the first game to return to the horror genre a little more strongly. And the atmosphere, this is one of the most atmospheric games of the franchise, taking place primarily on the ocean, and the soundtrack, man, it just all spells deep, like, yeah, the abyss of the ocean depths, you know? So yeah, this is definitely a high tier game for me. Let me check. I do like that it describes events prior to the establishment of the beginnings of the BSAA, basically, is one way to look at it. And events leading up to Lost in Nightmares within Resident Evil 5. So Revelations, I originally put at the very top of my A tier. It's definitely an A tier game. That's definitely the case. So I'm just going to put it in there. I'll sort it out later. But yeah, that's where it's going to go. Yeah, story is low-key really good. Hey, Tinley, glad you can make it. All right, after Revelations 1, we got one of the more questionable ones. Operation Raccoon City. This was like the first game in the franchise that I truly despised, like, with a lot of ounces of my fiber. Especially when it first came out. It's crazy. It's already been like 11 years since this game came out. A lot of time has passed, and even worse games have come out after it. So I look at it in a slightly different light now. It's not as bad as I always made it out to be. It's like, it can fuck off when it comes to storyline because it's a what-if scenario, and I will never praise it for that. No, I do not like it gave you the option to kill Leon and Claire. That is just stupid. So glad it's not canon and will never be considered for canonicity. But yeah, in terms of like a raw multiplayer game, it is a decent game. I do love the sheer amount of weapons that are in this game and how like accurate they are, and like with looks and design. And they're all based on real life weapons, so it's pretty interesting if you're a weapon buff. And yeah, if it just didn't bore the Resident Evil name, this would be a pretty good game out there, just in general, if you ask me. So anyway, now I'm giving it just a tiny bit more praise than I did last time, for sure. So I originally I definitely put it in my F tier, because it definitely was like a bottom tier game for me. Now, being a little more open-minded and stuff, I'm actually going to give it a fleeting chance, and it'll at least be a D tier game for me. There you go. That's how I feel about it now. I could see where some people really do enjoy this game. And yeah, I do still have my original gripes about it, though, in a lot of ways. All right, enough about that. Next game, Resident Evil 6, a very divisive game. Like, more so than 5, I feel like, in some ways. So 6, I've always said, which is still the case, is the worst numbered mainline title in the series. Like, out of all the numbered titles, it definitely is the lowest rated one for me. They just did way too much, too fast. They were trying to appease everyone, yet still kind of trying to compete with the Call of Duty audience, which was a very bad direction. And yeah, Mercenaries mode in Resident Evil 6 is amazing, don't get me wrong. It's one of the better points of it. In some ways, it's more fun than Resident Evil 5, I'll admit. The soundtrack is killer. But yeah, the story is just a freaking hot mess with all the crossing timelines and everything. And yeah, it's like the only remote horror elements in it are in Leon and Helena's campaign only, really. It's not really existent anywhere else, maybe except parts of Ada's. But yeah. Just, no, it fell very short for how much work went into it. Yeah, it's unfortunate. But let me put something out there. Ooh, I got a new subscriber just now. What was that? Oh, Paul Crombie just subscribed. Hey, awesome. Thanks for the subscription. That scared me for it because I haven't seen a notification in quite some time. But yeah, overloaded with QTEs. Thanks for mentioning that, Grandmaster. That's one of its weak points. It's just a giant QTE game, basically. Yeah, vehicle sections, crazy, but yeah, you make all good points, Grandmaster, honestly. But yeah, I can see where people love it. It's still a good game. Oh, this was the point I was gonna make. I don't think any Resident Evil game is so bad it deserves to die. Maybe except one, which will be the Toad once I get to it. But yeah, it's definitely the weakest mainline title for me. Okay, so where does that go on my rank then? Well, in the previous tier list, I did put it at the top of my C tier. It was the only C-tiered mainline game in my tier list. This time, I'm feeling just a little more generous, like really focusing on what I do like about it and not letting what may be bad about it get it down too much. So I think it can be at least in the B tier. Maybe the bottom of the B tier. Yeah, there you go. Okie dokie. Revelations 2, another really good game, definitely more horror focused and stuff, and it brings back one of the most iconic characters, Barry Burton, in all his glory, while introducing us to other characters, you know, such as actually getting to play as one of his daughters, Moira Burton, and this mysterious young girl named Natalia, which becomes a hanging plot point at the end of that game. I just want to put that out there, that we really need some closure on. But anyway, yeah, good feel game. Really gives off the Russian vibes with the lore and everything. It's what I like about the Revelations games. They're deep in, you know, culture of sorts. Basically, it has a remixed soundtrack of the first Revelation games in some places. And yeah. Story is weird. One of the things I don't like about it is how it was released. I didn't like the episodic format, honestly. It's kind of jumpy, especially because you keep switching between Claire and Moira and Barry and Natalia. You're just going through the same areas with both pairs, basically. I think it's just a little jumpy and non-linear. Yeah. A little disconnected, just a tiny bit there. But yeah, otherwise, it's a really, really good game, and definitely an A-tier game for me. I'm pretty sure that's where I put it last time. Yes. I put it below Revelations 1, though, ultimately. I probably would still do that, honestly. I think I like Revelations 1 more, just overall. Alright. It's raid mode. Raid mode, when it comes to both Revelations 1 and 2, they're fairly even. Although Rev 2 just expands it crazily. There's so many episodes. And, like, so many, like, branches, like, off of the levels and tiers and whatever. In fact, I personally have never like fully completed raid mode in Rev 2, like ever. So, something I still have yet to accomplish. Alright, but there it goes. A tier for me. Alright. We're getting close to the end. Alright, we gotta get through this shit heap. This is the Toad. Still, to this day. Umbrella Corps. It's an Umbrella Corpse. It's a corpse game. This is the only game that if it were to cease to exist, I probably wouldn't care less. Yeah, it's the Toad. There's nothing good about it. This is not a strong point for it. The fact that it's canon to the storyline, can you believe that? It is canon. Unbelievable. And apparently it hints at the return of Wesker. I didn't actually, for myself, see that indication because I played it very little. I've only played the first mission, maybe a few times, just to test out some gameplay mechanics and to record a clip or two, which you guys haven't seen yet, but one day they're going to be on the channel. Yeah, right. Seriously, Grandmaster. It doesn't even have Resident Evil in its name. Yeah, Tinley, I agree. And there was a long period, like a couple years after it first came out, basically, that period is where I would have never, ever considered putting it on my channel anywhere at any time. I have lightened up a lot since then, so it is part of the franchise, whether we like to admit it or not. And I am going to freaking play it and feature it on the channel one day. But yeah, doesn't mean it deserves any sort of praise whatsoever. I'd say from the little time I have played with it, the only good thing I can say about it is I like how super smooth the headshots are. That's about it. That's a very weak point. But yeah. That's all I'm going to talk about. Let's move on from that garbage heap and get into the RE Engine titles. This is where the series once again turns over. It's a turning point, basically. And I am with that bandwagon that says that Resident Evil 7 Biohazard brought back the franchise or revised it, revitalized it, whatever you want to say, or saved the franchise. A lot of people could disagree. A lot of people agree. So some could say this one is kind of divisive in some ways, but in my honest opinion, some of those ways are pretty petty. Anyway, this is a really good game, of course. It's definitely going into the S tier, at least for me. The fear factor was an all-time high when it came out. Being first person and a lot of dark areas, it really brought back the feel of a scary Resident Evil game to me. And yeah, Jack Baker, one of the most iconic stalker antagonists in the franchise, with just an iconic voice. Maybe not voice lines particularly, but just a memorable voice. Whoever voiced him did an amazing job. And his dark, like, his murder-driven humor is hilarious, I have to say. And Marguerite, what a creepy bug-infested hag, like, literally. Although, of course, being infected with the mold, she couldn't control that, but yeah. You're a son of a bitch! And Lucas, man, he makes my blood boil. He's one of the most annoying, like, people in the franchise, but very cleverly. I'll give him some praise for that. And Zoe, she just has a really nice southern accent and everything, and I just like her voice, and the fact that she tries to help Ethan and everything, yeah. And yeah, Resident Evil 7 has some of the best downloadable content for it, like the banned footage, Not a Hero, and End of Zoe. I know some people probably hate Not a Hero because, now we just returned back to the action again. What are you doing? And we got Imposter Redfield here. But no, overall, I think it's gained a little following now in the franchise, and it's an overall good game. So it's definitely getting an S tier for me. All right, that's enough about that. Now we got the remakes, like the RE Engine remakes that have started dividing the crowd. Okay, first you got Resident Evil 2 Remake. Definitely a really good game. When I first played it, I was claiming it as my new greatest of all time game. Because I thought initially it was better than the original. That was just recency bias, honestly. And I have since then, I've gone back to the original and I still like it way, way more. Because Resident Evil 2 Remake, while it is a very good remake overall, it does have some of the weak points that a lot of people who hate the remakes like to really, really emphasize on. While they make a point, it doesn't mean it should go way lower on people's opinion list. But yeah, it does fall short in some of the remaking elements. Like the second scenarios are garbage. I'm not gonna lie, they fell very short there. There's not nearly as much diversity in this game because of that. But like they do bring back a lot of the regular lines. They do change some up with the characters like Ben and Chief Irons. Like Chief Irons now, instead of just a psychopathic killer, now he's that and like a huge pedophiliac creep. It's just grosser. He's grosser than his OG format, in my opinion. None of the remakes have spiders. That is a weak point. I will give you that. But regardless of its weak points, I thought it was a fantastic way to relive the storyline of Resident Evil 2, and that's why I put it on such a high bar. So it is an S tier game for me. I'm just going to put it there, though. I'll rearrange later because there are some differences, of course, if you haven't seen already from my last tier list. So I'll emphasize on those really soon because we only have a few games left. All right. Next, we got Resident Evil 3 Remake. This one was very divisive and very mixed bag because even though it plays just like RE2 Remake in a lot of ways, mechanically, with a couple additional features, it was very rushed. It was given to a side studio within Capcom's departments, and if it had been giving at least another year of development, it probably would have been much closer to the status of Resident Evil 2 Remake. There's just way too much cut content. I know that's overstated at this point. It's just the truth. Just because it's overstated doesn't make it any less true. But yeah, the clock tower you're missing. The gravedigger is missing. Some events, a lot of events are missing. Like, it's just unfortunate how short it comes. But I do love the new dodge mechanic. I do like it even more than the OG's dodge mechanic. Like, for real. And other things. Honestly, I don't want to get too much into this one because again, it is very divisive. So, it's definitely not an S tier game like the other remake. Hell no. It's probably even questionable if it's even A rank. So, let me actually just see. Let me see where I put it. Yeah, previously I put it in the B tier, like in the middle of it. It's basically the same for me. It's still a B tier game. It is a good way to regard it now, honestly, is it is a great game. It is a terrible remake. That is honestly the best way to look at it, in my opinion, because it's so accurate. If you emphasize on the remake bits, it's a terrible game. If you emphasize on just the game alone and not compare it too hard to the OG RE3, it's a decent game and it's fun to play. So, yeah, it's gonna stay in the B tier for me. There you go. All right. We got another trash heap for me personally. RE Resistance. Yeah. I've only given this game maybe a couple hours of my time overall. My live overview of it when it first came out, it's still on my channel. You can check it out. But yeah, I was very disappointed by the end of it. I just couldn't handle playing it anymore. So yeah, it's definitely still an F tier game for me. It's on the bottom. It's definitely on the bottom 3, probably still at this point. Yeah. That's all I'm gonna say. And it's like it was an extension of Resident Evil 3. It came with Resident Evil 3 Remake, which is the only thing maybe that justifies Resident Evil 3 Remake's price. Let me return to Resident Evil 3 Remake just for a second. I am part of that bandwagon that thinks how pathetic it is that Separate Ways for Resident Evil 4 Remake is about the same length as Resident Evil 3, the entire game, and is way cheaper. That is extremely pathetic. But anyway, Resistance came bundled with RE3, which is the only reason it justifies maybe the price point. But didn't Capcom plan to sell Resistance before fans crapped on it? I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by sell Resistance before fans crapped on it. But anyway, yeah, it's a horrible multiplayer game for me. It's a Dead by Daylight ripoff, and I was really headstrong in. I was really invested in Dead by Daylight around the time this came out, so that was actually making it worse for me. Oh, I see. I don't know. I don't remember actually, but good thing they didn't because no. So Grandmaster, Separate Ways is actually worth on par with Resident Evil 3 Remake because you have to have RE4 Remake before you could even play Separate Ways. I mean, simply, Resident Evil 3 Remake is a whole game with the full game price point, while Separate Ways... Okay, I guess I see what you're saying, because ultimately you have to have RE4 Remake to even have Separate Ways, so the total cost is actually combined. Yeah, I guess that is a good counterpoint actually to that whole thing, but it doesn't change the fact that the game length. Can't deny that. All right. Enough about Resistance. Let's move on. Resident Evil Village. Okay. Another really strong one for me. Continues the Winters storyline and everything. Gives us a lot of Resident Evil 4 vibes due to being called Village and having a village center that connects many paths and everything. Iconic characters. Making thirsty fanboys for Lady D and shit. Became a part of culture in such a way. Yeah, it's definitely an S tier game for me. I know some people are divided on it. I know they're like, 7 did so good, but Village just put it into the ground or something like that. I don't get that whole mindset, honestly. I don't see much difference between 7 and Village, honestly, considering it's the same characters, same playstyle, with improved mechanics, if anything. I don't know. But it is a really good game, and that's why it's going on the S tier again for me. I'm glad we're almost at the end, because my throat is starting to get scratchy from all this talking. Yeah, definitely. Okay, here's a special one right now, and that's part of this list. Resident Evil 4 VR. So this was the Oculus Quest version of Resident Evil 4. VR version entirely. I did actually get to play this thanks to my fellow creator, Key Elements. I played the first chapter of the game in VR mode, so I do have actual experience with this, and I can give it an adequate ranking. It being just an extension of RE4 and playing in a whole nother perspective, basically I'm putting it right in the same spot as the OG RE4. Yeah. Not much more to emphasize on that, basically. Alright. Okay, RE-Verse. This was the latest game when I did the tier list last time, yet it hadn't been released yet. So the ranking I gave it was premature, and I had no experience to go off of other than the gameplay trailer or something. I'm not sure exactly where I put it last time. Part of me, I'm pretty sure I put it in the D tier. Yeah, I did. I put it next to Survivor in the D tier, so it was that in the previous tier list. That was a preconception. Now I've actually had the chance to play it, and surprisingly, it is one of the more fun multiplayer games that I've gotten to play in a long time. I honest to God, I have to say. So it's definitely going at least higher into the C tier this time around. So I would even put it higher if they had continued updating it. If they didn't just abandon it after painstakingly releasing each individual member of the Hound Wolf squad as the additional survivors, and just only adding one enemy and one new stage since its initial release, yeah, I would have put it on a higher tier. But the fact that they abandoned it and it had so much more potential, it's not going any higher than the C tier for me, honestly. So that's where I am disappointed with it. But gameplay wise and like playing around with friends was a blast during its time for me. All right, we have reached the end. The final game, the latest game of the franchise right now, RE4 Remake. Yeah, going straight there. This is now my second favorite game of the franchise. An emphasis on now because it is still relatively new. It's only, it came out, in March? I believe? Yeah. Came out March, so it's already been more than half a year since it's been out. So I may still have some recency bias for it, but for now, I do find it better than the OG RE4. And that, it's like, while I thought the same thing for Resident Evil 2, and over time I fell back, I really do not see myself doing that this time around because, you know what? One of the very small things that makes RE4 Remake so much better than the original is that parry mechanic. That parry mechanic is so useful, and oh my gosh. It's like, I'm sure a lot of people, after they played Resident Evil 4 Remake for some time, and they went back to the OG RE4, they probably got injured a lot trying to parry because it was just instinctual. I definitely did that. That one mechanic alone puts it way higher than the OG. But then, just all the retelling and everything, sure, there are some iconic moments that are missing, as usual, or just are just too different, something like that. But overall, there's so much to praise. I've already said this, Resident Evil 4 Remake is the best remake to come out since RE1 Remake. And that really is saying something, considering there's like a 20-plus year difference. There is a 20-year difference between them. 21-year difference between them. 10 late. It's like, sure, that might have been one of the weak points. Yeah, Ada's voice is a little iffy. But the whole controversy that went behind that, I'm sort of like, I'm hopping off that wagon. I don't care to talk about that. Because I don't think that should be one of the weak points. Especially considering what Lily Gao went through. All right, but yeah, it's going to the top of the S tier for sure for me. All right, so basically the tier list is finished. Now I'm just gonna do some fine tuning, and so here's the deal. This whole time I've been actually looking at two pictures. I have a picture of my previous tier list, and I have a picture of this tier list that I actually did a couple months ago just as a Twitter post in response to someone. So I technically already did this, so I had this to reference to actually put these in place. So now I'm really going to use the picture because I already did the fine-tuning then too. And so I'm going to use that to see where I put stuff. So yeah, if we let's start from the bottom. Yes, Umbrella Corps is still the Toad. It is the worst game in the entire franchise as of now for me. And it probably will be forever. We'll see. You never know. They could produce some sort of other garbage heap one day. Resistance, yep. It's at the bottom of the F tier. It's almost the Toad for me, just how I felt about it and everything. But if I had to choose between Umbrella Corps and Resistance, I would rather play Resistance. Because at least it has the RE engine, and I can mechanically play it just fine. And then Survivor 2, yeah, that is correct. It is staying at the top of the F tier. It almost could be a D tier game if it just had a little more plot element maybe to it and wasn't just so pure arcade feeling, you know? So yeah, that's that. Operation Raccoon City, yes, that is going to be at the bottom of the D tier because it's nearly an F tier game for me still, but I'm giving it just a little more praise and finding a little bit of value out of it, like in terms of weapons and multiplayer capability. Yeah. So, staying there. Gaiden is going to be after that. And Survivor. So yeah, everything is good where it is so far. So yeah, my bottom 5 games are Umbrella Corps, Resistance, Survivor 2, Orc, and Gaiden. And then Survivor is where it just starts getting closer to the middle of the list. Alright, so C tier now. Yeah, Mercenaries 3D will be at the bottom of the C tier because it is just a giant minigame, and there's not much more to praise about it. Dead Aim, middle of the C tier. Oh, yeah, I like that. And RE-Verse is going to be at the top of the C tier because, yes, I did get a lot of fun out of the multiplayer, regardless that it was extremely lacking of content when it had the potential for a lot more. All right. Now, B tier. Okay, so I am going to make some readjustments. I am going to put Resident Evil 6 at the bottom of the B tier because it is the worst mainline title for me. Still worse than RE3 Remake, regardless of how short it was. Because there are a lot more enjoyable elements about it. And yes, it is a little tainted by nostalgia, and that's going to trigger some people with the whole nostalgia glasses thing. But yeah. Let's see. Okay, well, Resident Evil 3 is actually going to go in the number 2 spot right there. Then, okay, so yeah, this is my B tier all the way. So 6, then Umbrella Chronicles, then Darkside Chronicles, then Resident Evil 3 Remake, because I would still rather play that than the Chronicles games, but Resident Evil 0 does do better than RE3 Remake, I think, overall. Alright, next, you got the A tier. Okay, the only thing I really need to change is this. So this is my A tier, the way it is now. So the both Revelations game are at the very bottom of the A tier. Rev 1 is better than Rev 2 in my opinion. Then the Outbreaks, they're bundled as one. They're interchangeable. Code Veronica. And then, yeah, I like Resident Evil 5 way more overall than Code Veronica. I just know from my own experience and the insane amount of hours I put into it. And then the original RE1, of course I do like more than Resident Evil 5 because you can't get more nostalgic than the original Resident Evil 1. And I just love the diversity of the events, the zapping system and everything, and just all the many different things you could do in the original Resident Evil game. Alright. And finally, we got our S tier. Okay, so I'm going to rearrange some things. Deadly Silence is going to the bottom of the S tier because it deserves to be right next to the original Resident Evil because it's just a port of it. But for me, Resident Evil 1 overall is like in between A and S. It's like an A plus or S minus game for me. So this is a good way to segue from the A to the S by 2 versions of Resident Evil 1. Alright, next I'm going to put Remake after Deadly Silence because it's another version of Resident Evil 1 overall, the storyline, but it is overall the best version of RE1 to play out there. Alright, next I'm going to put Resident Evil 7 in front of that because it brought this series back to the survival horror genre, in my opinion. After that, Village, that is the right spot, because I put 7 and Village like pretty much on the same level, on the same pedestal, more or less, because they're both Ethan, both first person, and they're both like extensions of each other. So, alright, now Resident Evil 4 is going to go here, right there, after Village. And then Resident Evil 2 Remake, and then RE3 Nemesis. Okay, so yeah, the VR, I'm going to put the VR below the original, like, because it does come with its hindrances being in VR and everything like that. Like, reloading a gun can be difficult if you don't know what you're doing. Alright. This is it, actually. This is my completed tier list overall. So, the reason why I'm putting Resident Evil 4, or I should say Resident Evil 3, higher than I did last time is because I realized I've played this game more than any of the trilogy games. Played it so many times, I've And it's just like RE1 in the sense that it has many different events you could trigger, or like different angles of certain events. And yeah, everything I already said about it is why I'm actually putting it higher. Then Resident Evil 4 Remake, of course, is an amazing game that I'm still willing to play right now a little bit. And then the GOAT is RE2 OG. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so that is my updated tier list of the Resident Evil franchise. I hope you enjoyed watching this, and I hope a majority of you agree with most of my points. But everything is subjective. Everyone has their own opinion. There are no right or wrong opinions. Opinions are never factual. Just keep that in mind when you criticize other people. Some people are capable of being like constructive with their criticisms. All right. Well, I hope you all have a good day for the rest of the day, and I hope those of you watching this back are having a good day as well. And yeah, one day I will do this again when we get maybe 1 or 2 more games. And yeah, it won't be live anymore. I think this is the last time I'm going to do a live tier list, honestly. Because it's like, yeah, it's fun to chat with you guys a little bit, but this one has definitely proven it's probably not something necessarily to do live. So, yeah. But I will see you guys in another tier list one day, maybe a couple years down the road. Otherwise, got a really cool video coming up soon after this is over. Hopefully in the next few days I get it uploaded. You'll see. All right. Peace out. Take it easy, guys.